Margaret Wilson stood in the doorway of the grand riverside estate, watching the seventh nanny gather her designer luggage. The young woman's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she hurried toward the exit, her face a mixture of frustration and relief. "I can't do this anymore," the nanny muttered, not even bothering to say goodbye to little Emma. Margaret had worked as a housekeeper for the Harrison family for 3 months now. She was 58 years old, with kind brown eyes and hands that had cleaned 1,000 homes. She'd raised 3 children of her own, watched them grow and leave the nest, and now she found comfort in the simple rhythm of keeping a house in order. A thoughtful pause. David Harrison was a man of 42 who'd built an empire in technology. Tall, always impeccably dressed in pressed suits, he moved through his home like a stranger, checking his watch, taking calls, building walls between himself and the world. His daughter Emma was 4 years old, with golden curls and the brightest blue eyes Margaret had ever seen. The child had been diagnosed with autism at age 2. 7 nannies in 6 months. Each one had arrived with confidence and credentials, and each one had left defeated. They'd tried structure and schedules, rewards and timeouts, but nothing seemed to reach little Emma. The child lived in her own world, speaking rarely, avoiding eye contact, finding comfort only in her routines and her toys arranged just so. A gentle pause. Margaret had watched it all from the edges of the household. She'd seen Mr. Harrison grow more distant with each failure, working longer hours, coming home later. She'd seen the strain in his shoulders, the way he'd look at his daughter with a mixture of love and helplessness that broke her heart. That evening, after the 7th nanny had gone, Margaret was in the living room dusting the bookshelves. Emma sat on the floor, carefully arranging her colored blocks in a specific pattern. Red, blue, yellow, green, over and over. The child hummed softly to herself, lost in her world. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway, still in his work clothes, his tie loosened. He looked exhausted. "I don't know what to do anymore, Margaret," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd really spoken to her beyond simple instructions. Every expert says the same things. Every nanny tries the same approaches. Nothing works. A pause filled with understanding. Margaret set down her dust cloth and looked at him, with the gentle wisdom of someone who'd learned that life, rarely followed the scripts we wrote for it. "If I may say something, Mr. Harrison," she began carefully, "perhaps Emma doesn't need someone trying to change her. Perhaps she just needs someone willing to meet her where she is." He looked at her, confusion and something like hope flickering in his tired eyes. The next morning, Margaret arrived early as always. She went about her work, but when she entered the living room, she paused. Emma was there, arranging her blocks again in that same careful pattern. Instead of just cleaning around the child as she usually did, Margaret did something different. She sat down on the floor a few feet away and simply watched. A warm pause. Emma glanced at her briefly, then continued her work. Margaret didn't try to interact, didn't try to change the pattern or teach a lesson. She just sat, present and peaceful. After several minutes, Margaret picked up a yellow block that had rolled away. She placed it gently near Emma's pattern, not interfering, just helping. Emma's small hand reached out and took the block, fitting it into her sequence. Days passed this way. Margaret would sit with Emma during her breaks, not as a nanny or teacher, but as a companion. She learned Emma's rhythms, the humming when she was content, the way she'd rock gently when overwhelmed, the precise order her stuffed animals needed to be in before bedtime. A gentle pause. Mr. Harrison noticed. He'd come home to find Margaret sitting on the floor with Emma, not trying to make the child talk or play differently, just being there. The housekeeper would narrate her cleaning in a soft, steady voice. "Now I'm dusting the table. Now I'm straightening the pillows." And Emma would listen, sometimes watching, sometimes continuing her own activities. One evening, about 3 weeks after the 7th nanny had left, something remarkable happened. Mr. Harrison had come home earlier than usual. He stood in the hallway, still holding his briefcase, frozen by what he saw. A pause filled with emotion. Emma was walking across the living room. Not unusual in itself, but she was walking toward Margaret, her small hand outstretched, holding a toy she wanted to show her. The child's face held something it rarely did: engagement, connection, trust. Margaret looked up from her dusting, saw Emma approaching, and her face broke into the warmest smile. She knelt down slowly, her aging knees protesting, and received the offered toy, a small stuffed bear, with gentle reverence. "Oh, Emma," Margaret said softly. "Is this your friend?" "He's wonderful." Emma didn't speak, but she smiled. A real smile that reached those bright blue eyes. Mr. Harrison felt something crack open in his chest. He'd been so focused on fixing, on solving, on finding the right professional with the right credentials. He'd forgotten about simple human kindness. A thoughtful pause. He set down his briefcase and walked into the room. "Margaret," he said, his voice thick with emotion. May I join you both?" Margaret looked up at him, understanding everything in that moment. "Of course, Mr. Harrison. Emma and I were just spending time together. Perhaps you'd like to sit with us?" David Harrison, Billionaire CEO, removed his suit jacket and sat down on the floor of his living room. Emma glanced at him, then returned her attention to showing Margaret her toys one by one. But after a few minutes, as her father sat there quietly, not demanding, not trying to force interaction, just being present, Emma brought him a toy, too, a small yellow block. His hands trembled as he took it. A warm pause. Margaret excused herself to give them time together. But as she stood to leave, Mr. Harrison spoke. "Margaret, please don't go. You've shown me something I couldn't see. Would you... That is, I wonder if you'd consider..." He struggled to find words. "The position of nanny is open, but I don't think that's what Emma needs. I think she needs a friend, someone who understands that different doesn't mean broken." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Harrison, I'm just a housekeeper. I don't have any fancy degrees or training." "No," he said, watching his daughter carefully place the yellow block in Margaret's hand, then his. "But you have something more important. You have wisdom and kindness and patience. You see my daughter as she is, not as you think she should be." A gentle pause. And so Margaret's role in the Harrison household changed. She still kept the house because she found satisfaction in that work. But she also became Emma's companion, her steady presence, her bridge to the world. Mr. Harrison began coming home earlier. He'd sit on the floor with them, learning his daughter's language of gestures and patterns. Margaret taught him what she'd learned, that Emma communicated in her own ways, that her carefully arranged toys were her way of creating order in a chaotic world, that her humming was contentment, not disconnection. Slowly, gently, the house became a home. A warm pause. 6 months later, Emma spoke her first word in nearly a year. She was sitting with Margaret, arranging blocks as always, when one rolled under the couch. The child looked at Margaret and clearly simply said, "Help." Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears as she retrieved the block. "Always, sweetheart, always." Mr. Harrison, watching from the doorway, understood then what he'd been missing. His daughter didn't need fixing. She needed accepting. She needed someone to enter her world before she could feel safe entering theirs. A thoughtful pause. Margaret retired from housekeeping 2 years later, but she never left the Harrison family. She became Emma's nanny, companion, and friend, teaching Mr. Harrison along the way that the greatest gift we can give anyone is to see them truly, accept them fully, and love them unconditionally. Sometimes the answers we seek aren't found in credentials or expertise. Sometimes they're found in the simple, profound act of sitting on the floor with someone and saying, "Without words, I see you. You are enough." And sometimes the people we least expect, a housekeeper in yellow gloves, approaching retirement, turn out to be exactly what we need. A final, warm pause. That's where kindness lives. Not in grand gestures, but in patient presence. Not in changing others, but in accepting them. Not in professional distance, but in human connection. Emma is 12 now. She still arranges her toys carefully, still hums when she's content. She speaks more, engages more, but she's still beautifully, authentically herself. And Margaret, now 70, still visits every week, sitting on the floor that her old knees protest more than ever, sharing quiet companionship with the girl, who taught her that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest love. A gentle closing. Some stories don't end with everything changing. Sometimes they end with someone finally seeing what was always there, waiting to be noticed, accepted, and cherished.